Okay, John, your first task is going to be a reaction time task,
U.S. veterans returning from the 1991 Gulf War claim something happened in the Gulf that has ruined their health. Many vets believe the military knows the causes of the Gulf War illness and is covering them up. Skeptics say the illness is caused by faulty logic and rumor mongering.
As much as these people have been bombarded with the message that they should be sick, it's a wonder that more of them are not, in fact, sick.
To sick veterans and their advocates, the idea that Gulf War illness exists only in their heads is profoundly offensive.
These skeptics that say it's all in my head, I would like them to live my life for 24 hours. I'm on 800 milligrams of ibuprofen and see if they still think it's in my head. It's a psychiatric drug. It's to help my depression. I would like them to have to take 180 milligrams of morphine per day. I've been taking this for 3 or 4 years. I would like them to take 30 minutes to get out of bed in the morning. This drug is trazodone. And see if they think it's still in my head. If I don't take my trazodone, I cannot sleep. The pain keeps me awake.
I don't believe what the military tells you now. There's too much secretive stuff going on.
There is one thing on which both sides agree. The relationship between the military and Gulf War veterans is itself toxic. When the troops were first deployed, Saddam's chemical and biological weapons were a serious concern. Hypervigilance was the rule. Everyone received a gas mask, and most took experimental anti-nerve gas pills. So when the troops were then told to ignore their sensors, and sometimes their own senses, many felt that they were being deceived. When some started getting sick, they suspected a link to their Gulf War service and had no faith in government denials.
Even up to this date, the government keeps telling us that there were no chemical weapons used. It doesn't make any sense to me because of the things I saw and experienced over there.
I was exposed to the vaccines. I was exposed to the experimental tablets. I was exposed to oil well fires. I was exposed to unspent shells of A-10, depleted uranium shells. I was exposed to dead bodies. The more questions we asked, the more we were told to mind our own business.
The issue of sarin nerve gas reinforced the vets' suspicions. For 5 years after the Gulf War, the Pentagon contended that no sarin was ever released. As it turned out, that wasn't exactly true. After U.S. troops blew up an Iraqi arms depot at a place called Qamishiyah, UN inspectors found sarin on the site. It took the Department of Defense years to admit to the vets that they might have been exposed. Doug Rocky was one of the vets who got a Qamishiyah letter.
It said, "Dear Doug, in 2000, this is 9 years after the fact, guess what? You were zapped by the detonation at Qamishiyah." I called him up and I said, "Thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks a lot, Bernie. You know, I'm the one that put out one of the original warnings when it happened."
After admitting that at least 100,000 troops were exposed, the Pentagon then declared that it hadn't done them any harm.
We've not seen any difference in the health of those people in that hazard area.
But the perceived lack of candor took its toll. Vets and advocates had no faith in Pentagon denials and no trust in military medical research.
I think that the evidence base has had this uphill battle because we're now introducing an evidence base into a context and a climate that was really already poisoned by the distrust.
Gulf War vets didn't have to look far to find an example that convinced them the Pentagon was willing to lie to sick veterans. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. sprayed millions of gallons of a chemical defoliant called Agent Orange.
It took, 20, 30 years for the government to say, oh yeah, you were exposed to Agent Orange. And I'm sitting here going, what are they going to do with us? You know, wait 20 or 30 years down the line when most of us are dead and say, oh yeah, you might have, yeah, I think you were exposed to something.
For the 100,000 Gulf War vets exposed to sarin, it took 16 years. In 2007, in a remarkable reversal, a Boston University study found that the Comacea sarin release had caused lasting brain defects, and the amount of damage corresponded to the level of exposure. Why did it take so long to find that the vet's suspicions about the exposure and the effects were right? Part of the problem was that the researchers were looking for a small number of shared symptoms.
We're looking at something new. There was no single entity, single thing that caused the health effects that we see, that caused the environmental catastrophe we see. It's a synergistic relationship of all.
For researchers, the idea of multiple causes and a variety of effects is a nightmare. Science works by testing things one at a time. Another problem was that some of the tests and tools that could help solve the mystery didn't exist in the early 1990s. It was new analytical software that allowed Boston researchers to uncover the neurological damage caused by the sarin release. And as with sarin, the early research into the effects of depleted uranium could not find a direct connection between exposure and illness. But that too is changing with the arrival of new equipment and software. According to advocates, almost everyone in the Gulf was exposed to DU. And the effect of radioactivity, according to Dr. Asef Durakovic, is even more damaging to the soldiers' long-term health.
We are dealing with the largest single isotope accident that occurred in the world since discovery of radioactivity in 1896.
Durakovic believes that the military claim that DU is harmless is misleading. Uranium emits alpha particles that don't travel very far, so even tons of DU in its metallic form won't harm you. But inhaling alpha-contaminated smoke or dust from burning DU is a very different story.
We can sleep on the bed made of depleted uranium without much harm caused to the body because alpha radiation does not penetrate thickness of the skin.
Even DU shrapnel inside soldiers' bodies would cause no ill effects, he says, because it is surrounded by scar tissue. But according to Durakovic, if you breathe in even tiny amounts of an alpha emitter like uranium, those radioactive atoms could cause tremendous damage to your system.
We are talking about quantities that are so small that cannot even be comprehended. We are talking about millions upon million times less than 1 gram.
All humans have about 70 micrograms of natural uranium in our bodies. And we're not aware of medical science that has a health effect on people. So adding a small amount of depleted uranium to the natural uranium in our body, we wouldn't expect that would have any health outcome.
But is the exposure to DU from breathing in dust different from natural exposure? Not long after the vets returned, Dr. Durakovic, also a trained physicist, suspected radiation and began testing to see if depleted uranium was at the root of their problems. He claims he soon came up against roadblocks.
I received the threats. If I don't stop my work, my job will be eliminated, which they were truthful to their threats indeed, because I did lose my job at the Veterans Hospital under the pretext that it was a staff reduction.
Durakovic never completed his tests. Now we're going to carry that research even further by using a new type of diagnostic machine to look into the DNA of 5 Gulf War vets who say they became sick after returning from the war. Can a spectral karyotyping test find a link between radioactivity and a huge variety of Gulf War symptoms? Find out next on Conspiracy Test.